All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Hannah Crapo. I'm the content marketing manager here at Certiport. We're happy to have everyone joining us. This is kind of sad, our last Certified Academy Design webinar for 2024. We're heading into the live event season. We're excited to see everyone hopefully at our live certified event next month, which we'll talk about in a little bit. I wanted to give everyone a chance, though, to drop into the chat. Let us know where you're joining us from and what courses you teach, so that we can learn a little bit more about each other, get to connect as well. This session is previously been recorded, so we'll be sending out the link to the full recording via email after our presentation has wrapped this afternoon. If you have any questions, feel free to drop into the Q&A or the chat feature so that we can make sure to address those as we wrap up today. And today we're here to dive into the world of design and talk about creating with all of these different applications that are available to us, Adobe, Autodesk, and Unity. And we're here to be learning from Charles Hache. So Charles, without further ado, I'm just going to give you a chance. I'm going to stop sharing so everyone can see you, to tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do.
Absolutely. So my name is Charles Hache. I am a Unity certified instructor. I'm also a tech mentor and a coach. I also teach at the high school level and I teach at the university level internationally. So it's really fun.
Amazing.
Lots of fun projects going on.
I know. Tell us, I was just grilling you a little bit before we started recording. Tell us a little bit about the courses that you teach and the areas of design that you're involved with.
Sure. So starting at like my 9 to 5 job, which is the teaching at a high school,
Hmm.
I absolutely love this. We teach an introduction into Unity, an introduction into game design, an introduction into computer science using JavaScript, and that's absolutely fun as well. It's a little bit more free to be able to make mistakes or to do
Yeah.
things in a different way and still teach the fundamentals of computer science and that. Then we have an advanced course in Unity. So this is one that helps us to explore things like networking and virtual reality. And then we have an app development course that we primarily focus on iOS using Swift. And then next year, hopefully we're going to be, well, not hopefully, next year we're going to be doing a virtual production pathway and we're going to tie a whole bunch of other pieces together. So that's just at the high school level.
That's just, and then at the collegiate level, you teach as well, correct?
Correct. So I've designed and taught courses internationally, both in the United States and Canada and abroad, and primarily focusing on Unity and Unity development from a beginner's perspective all the way
Mm,
up through just above like an intermediate level.
okay.
Yeah, it's been absolutely fun.
Nice. I love that. So we want to talk today about balancing and finding the best tools for the job. So we've talked about over the last several weeks, designing with Adobe, designing with Autodesk, and of course, designing with Unity. And so I wanted to talk to you, what tools and applications are you using primarily in your line of work? You've called out Unity specifically, but I believe you're balancing some other ones in there as well.
Absolutely. So on my day-to-day, it's primarily focused in Unity. And the way that I approach that from an educator side of view is a point of view rather, is that what I'm looking for is an easy access for students to be able to try something that allows them to go as deep as they want to.
Mm,
And I found that Unity has a nice onboarding and it's got a nice set of resources that aren't super labor intensive when it comes to computer hardware. So I know that for instance, I've used like Epic and I've used Godot and everything like that. And they are wonderful resources, but they have different sets of strengths. And in the area of teaching where you've got a limited set of technology, Unity
mm,
has a pretty good hold there to be able to stay focused or to expand out, but without causing problems. And that's the same sort of thing that I've been experiencing inside of the game development sector as well. So you wouldn't necessarily design a mobile game inside of Epic
mhm.
because it doesn't truly make a lot of sense for you to take all that raw power and kind of shrink it down into a phone. Not to say that it can't,
Sure.
it's just not where it shines. It's like you have a screw that needs to be put in. Do you hammer it in? Do you use a hand tool to screw it in, or do you use a power drill to put it in?
Right.
And it's like, well, it really depends, but you probably don't use a hammer.
Yeah. So tell us, I know you talked about bringing in Adobe next year into your coursework as well. Tell us what made you decide to bring in another application? So you've primarily been focusing on Unity. Why bring in Adobe?
Yeah, so Adobe is not necessarily new to the education space, nor is it
Right.
new to the industry. And that's what makes it a really good feature of bringing it back into education and kind of
Hmm.
merging it with some other areas. Adobe's got some great learning platform and learning resources. It's got a huge community of following.
Hmm.
It's become really easy to adopt at a individual learning level as well as a classroom level. And then at the same time, it becomes something that we use in the industry as well when we're making
Hmm.
trailers, or in the case of what we're doing, we're going to be doing virtual production. So we're going to be blending some things together so that we can get a full video production that'll come along with it. And that same tool is used in many, many places as well. So it just became a no-brainer to be able to use that particular tool.
I love that. So tell me how you've talked about deciding on these different tools that you've used and settling on what you offer to teach in your classroom. What goes into considering which applications to use and when? How do you make that decision with your kids?
Sure. So one of the first things that I looked at when I was designing the courses that I teach at the high school and the college level is I needed something that was relatively accessible for
Mm,
students. And I took a look at the landscape and said, okay, approximately how many games are being built out there? If I'm trying to teach students how to learn to build games, what percentage of games are being built on each platform? And then what's the adoption rate for students to be able to take on those tasks
mm,
in each one of those game engines? And then what does the future look like if I were to learn this one or this one or this one?
mhm,
Is there available opportunities for those things? And you've probably seen that the game industry has gone through quite a bit of flux recently.
mhm.
Not even recently, just generally over the past 10
Yeah.
years. It's been really up and down, some greats and some kind of shallow areas. And looking through that and then still looking now, even though there has been some significant ups and downs in the Unity specific space, the opportunities that are available after you've learned a game development engine such as Unity or how
Mhm,
game development engines work, still makes Unity a really approachable system. It
mm,
comes with certifications that are industry recognized that we look at and we say, okay, that's good. That shows me that you have some knowledge in this particular area, and it adds weight to your portfolio.
mhm,
So it's not a supplanting of your portfolio, but it definitely bolsters it. It says, yes, you have this, and there's some other features that you've learned and you've mastered that aren't being shown off in your portfolio work, and
mm.
so it adds to it. I wouldn't say that it stands by itself, nor do I think that your portfolio work stands by itself either. It has to have some sort of supporting systems.
Yeah,
So
I agree.
when I looked at, yeah, so when I looked at that and I looked at, my next one, which was going to be Premiere Pro,
Hmm.
I had the same concern. So there's Blackmagic and and there's DaVinci Resolve and so we use Max here. So there's Final
Yep.
Cut and stuff like that. There are a lot of different other resources that are available. And
Hmm.
again, I looked at what could my students be the most successful with and still get into the industry and have relevance with, and then having a certification that can support that they've learned that to go along with their portfolio. So that's generally the way that I approach. If I'm introducing new technology in the education space, what does it need to satisfy?
Hmm. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about, I mean, we're balancing a lot of different components when it comes to teaching these types of skills in the classroom. And obviously, when you're creating a project, a lot of times if it's simulating a real world situation, you're going to have students bouncing between applications. So tell us a little bit about how you've kind of struck the balance and what some of those projects look like.
Yeah, so there is not as much time as we'd like inside of a
Yeah.
school year. There's a little less than 180 hours in a typical school year
Yeah.
that you get to be able to spend with students. So you really have to fine tune down to what are the skills that you're going to be trying to
Mm,
convey to them, and what are going to be the concepts that you're going to try and convey to them, and then ultimately what's the context that you're trying to put it in, and that'll
mm,
kind of sew it all together. So you can't master multiple sets of things. There is an upper limit where you stop mastering and you start becoming a jack of all trades.
Hmm.
And I definitely want my students to have that breadth of learning all the
Hmm.
different pieces as much as possible. But um, for instance, what we're going to be focusing on is the editing and learning how
Mm.
to edit and color grade and doing audio balancing and stuff. There's so much more that we could do, and we're going to cover everything that's going to be required for
Yeah.
the Premiere Pro. But you have to choose, what area are you going to focus in on so that they have that foundation of knowledge that they can
Hmm.
start to branch out on. And the same is true when I do like tech mentoring with my with other educators or
Hmm.
with people who are working in the industry. It's like, let's find some foundational piece that is going to help you to move over. Like, let's say now you're learning C++ or now you're learning C sharp. What
Right.
foundational root of knowledge do you need to be able to have in order to be able to expand on that? Uh,
Mm.
that's really what I'm looking for.
So how do you figure out what those components are, right, that you focus in on so that they have that almost transferable set of skills afterwards?
Yeah. So I can't, right? So by myself, I can't do those kinds of things. If I
Yeah.
was the one that was making all those decisions, then I would also be the CEO of the game company
Yeah.
and I'd be the person playing the game. So the reality is that you have to get outside source. You have to look
Mm.
at who in the industry is utilizing these things and how well are they
Hmm.
connected to the hiring or the management of other people. So that
Mm.
way they can use their experience and you can pull that from as many different areas as possible, whether it's another college professor or it's a senior developer or a director of creativity from video production.
Hmm.
Where as many areas that you can pull in as possible to say, this is a skill that would be across the spectrum
Mm.
that would be really important to be able to have. Or when people come in and I'm ready to start, bringing them on board as junior developers, junior editors, these are the foundational sets of skills that we need in order to be able to have them be functional so that we can
Mm.
bring them up in the areas that are special.
Yeah.
Because if you go to work for Universal Studios or you go to work for Disney, they're going to have different approaches to how they do things, but they still have the same set of expectations as far as what does that baseline look like. So
Mm.
reaching out to my industry partners and reaching out to my advisory boards and fellow educators in the space, that's really how I determined what skills, concepts, and contexts that we're going to be kind of focusing in on.
So I'm curious then how you've been able to, over the course of your teaching career, establish those types of relationships, because I do think that having a pulse on what's going on in industry really should shape what you're teaching in the classroom, right? So how are you making those connections with these people?
Yeah. So in the very beginning, I was just essentially cold calling
Yeah.
people saying, hey, this is what I'm doing. Is there any interest in kind of coming along me? And then one of the big things that started to help me out was going to industry relations meetups like the Game Developers Conference
Mm.
or Indiecade or things like that. And then as soon as I started talking about that, there's a lot of love in our space, in the creative space, for education, because anytime you hear education and you're already on the other side of this, you're like, these are new people that have a passion for what I do,
Yeah.
and I just want to pour into them. And
Mhm.
the other side is like, I'm not looking for a job, right? So
Yeah.
now it's not like, am I going to have to
Not
vet this
asking for
person?
anything, just looking for some validation. Yeah.
You'd be surprised how many people are just like, yes, I'd love to do this. And I'm like, I didn't even ask you for help, but it's
Yeah.
great to be able to kind of get that. So going to as many industry meetups
Mm.
and joining groups on like LinkedIn is a great way to be able to talk about that.
Mm.
And then just don't join, be engaged and ask questions. Unity's got a great community of educators that has a Discord and a Facebook group, and you get people in there all the time that are just like, hey, this is where I'm stuck at, this is what I'm doing, this is how I'm trying to approach things, or I'm having difficulty with these particular types of
Mm.
students, this particular type of technology. And you'll have like 20 people that will jump in and give their response, and not all of them are industry experts, but some of them are experts in other areas, and it's
Yeah.
definitely helpful to be able to grow that out. And then um, just kind of reaching out to people. So I still haven't stopped cold calling people to introduce them to these things and these concepts and see what sticks, throwing spaghetti
Mhm.
at the wall. And that's probably been the biggest hurdle is matching up their difficult time schedules, the things that they've
Mhm.
got that are going on for them, with my availability working, 8 to
As a
3:15
teacher, yeah,
5 days
a
a
teacher
week.
schedule. Yeah.
Yeah. So I, oddly, I found the most help overseas when their day is basically done, or if I stay
Sure.
up really late and it's
Sure.
like during the day for them. So that has been really, really helpful. And I've grown a lot of relationships with game design companies in the UK or in the UAE, for
Mm.
example, Australia, because our time schedules link up a little bit better for them to be able to like kind of be at their desk and be ready to
Mhm.
go, and me to not necessarily have anything. So it's been a lot of late nights.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, kudos to you for all of the effort that you've poured into that, because I think that that really makes a difference in your approach in the classroom. And I'm curious what you've learned from these industry professionals that's kind of modified the way that you teach in your classroom.
Yeah. So one of the biggest things that I picked up on right away, from industry contacts, is that it's less about learning a game engine and more about learning the concepts that are being done
Mm.
inside of that game engine. So and it comes down to the field, right? So not everybody's going to be
Right.
a game programmer. Some people are going to be environmental artists or level designers
Hmm.
or whatever those are. And those skill sets are relatively universal across all the different game engines or
Hmm.
programming skills and stuff like
Hmm.
that. So focusing in on those and not so much, okay, I want to know that you have mastered Unity. It's like,
Hmm.
nah, what I want to know is, have you mastered the skills that are required for like these 5 jobs, let's say,
Sure.
and or even just this one very specific job that correlates to an entry level job that you'd be able to get when you leave
Mm.
the industry. And so I found that a lot of educators that are coming into the space are like, oh, let's teach Unity because Unity's, used all over the place. And admittedly, that was one of the first approaches that I had as well. But what I've discovered is that Unity, like every other engine that's out there, has its ups and downs. And
Hmm.
so if their knowledge is purely Unity or purely Adobe or purely Autodesk, and they don't have the other sets of skills that go along with the concepts that they're learning,
Mm.
then they kind of flounder. And
Mm.
unfortunately, we see a lot of people that are kind of floating around LinkedIn that are like, I really know these skills. I'm really not an unintelligent person, but
Hmm.
I can't find a job.
Yeah.
And my heart goes out to them because they are really smart and they're really active. And what's the motivation to keep learning? Because they feel
Mm.
like they already know Unity or they feel like they already know Adobe Premiere. And the motivation to keep learning is like there's still so many skill sets for the job that you want that
Mm.
you haven't mastered yet.
So I want to dive deeper into this. Sorry, I'm so interested in this concept and this idea is that it's not just about kind of those technical skills, but it's a balance of finding skill sets in multiple areas. So what are some of those, if they're soft skills or hard skills, that you think will help students be more universal in their approach, whatever type of design they end up going into?
Yeah, I would say the number one soft skill that everybody needs across the board is patience.
Mm.
Um, Even with yourself. So people want to be able to get it done correctly the first time, or they feel like they're not a super genius. Or they'll apply for a job and it just seems to take so long that they just lose hope for it.
Mm.
It's a big patience piece. There are many people that are on the other side of the things that you're trying to do that also have things that they're going on with.
Hmm.
And thinking or harboring ill will towards yourself or to others is not a productive mode of thought.
Mm.
So my first soft skill that I try to teach my students and I try to be emblematic for is that patience piece. And then the next thing is to understand that you know something now that somebody else next to you doesn't know.
Mm.
So even my students that are in high school who are learning the very basics of Unity, they know so much more about Unity, even if they fail the class, They know so much more about Unity than a student who didn't take that
Right.
class, which sets them apart from that larger spectrum. So there is there's a it's like, I don't know who I am. I don't know if I'm this person. It's a
Yeah.
complex that we're kind of developing within ourselves. And that's true even as you decide, okay, I'm going to get into the game industry and I've been in here for a while and I'm a
Hmm.
senior software developer. And you're like, I just don't know if I really am a senior software
A
developer.
lot of that
And
imposter syndrome. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And the problem with those things is like, one, it's not productive,
Hmm.
right? And two, the thing that I've learned in kind of progressing up through education, and I think anybody who has an advanced degree would tell you the same thing, is like the higher degree that you get, the dumber you realize you actually are. There's so much to learn in so
Yeah.
many areas that there are superstars who know so much about them, but I guarantee that they go online all the time looking for things that they don't know the answer to.
Yeah.
And if they do it, why can't you do that? You
Hmm.
should allow yourself to be comfortable being uncomfortable.
Mm. I love that. That concept of lifelong learning, I think, especially in today's sphere, is so important because, to your point, there's lots of ebbs and flows with technology and so many things changing all the time. So even if I feel like I'm a master at something today, that doesn't mean that it couldn't completely change by tomorrow. So having that flexibility and that ability to continue to learn makes a huge impact. So in thinking about this and the educator's role in fostering these types of skills, how do you think educators can empower students with skills in multiple applications or some of these like universal types of skills that designers and creatives need to be successful?
So authentic learning
Mm,
is a catchphrase that we throw around a lot. And what I like to kind of show people what authentic learning means is that a student will ask me a question I don't know the answer to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, I don't know the answer, but let's
mm,
find out. And so then giving them my thought process as I'm going through those things is probably the biggest advantage that they get is,
mm,
okay, I struggle with this. I know I struggle with this. How am I going to find out the answer to these things? So I'll ask somebody, and now this person doesn't know, but they're showing me how they go through their process,
mm.
especially in nowadays where we have got, and this will kind of tie into answering your questions.
Sure.
Things are constantly changing that are
Hmm.
going on out there. And how do I know what I need to learn that's next? Well, I don't know the answer to that question, but let me show you how I would look into that.
Yeah.
And so I do things like start talking to fellow workers on LinkedIn, or I'd start looking through chat forums, or I'd start looking at new releases that are coming out for like Unity 6, for example,
Hmm.
or the brand new pieces that are coming into Verse for Epic. All these pieces and components are brand new, and I don't necessarily know what I need to know until somebody else essentially tells me that I didn't know
Hmm.
that information. So just being on this constant course of learning and saying, okay, this is really important. So we've shifted away from some things inside of our courses. So we used to do a lot of board games, and I think board games are really important, and I wish I could kind of have the time to be able to bring them back. But they taught a lot of the skills that are necessary for creative problem solving.
Mm,
And creative problem solving isn't a piece that has gone away. That's
hmm.
definitely something that's there. Whenever you're in any creative field, regardless, you're going to be given something and it's going to be tilted just enough so that it doesn't line up with the way that you previously did it.
Right.
And so now you've got to think about and problem solve, how am I going to approach this in a different way that's going to be able to support the target's wants. So whether it's the teacher or the client or your boss, how am I going to take what I already know and shape it in the way that they're wanting it so that it will be the product that they need it to be?
Mm,
And so being okay with going on YouTube and watching brand new people kind of go into this and seeing how it's done. Um, Getting involved in creative groups, whether it's game design
mm,
groups that are at your local college, high school, in your local area, online. They've got so many different game jams. Um, like seeing new things, experience new things. So play a bunch of games, watch a bunch of different videos, watch people react to videos, watch people
hmm.
react to the editing that's going on. Or if you're learning Autodesk, like the new technical sets of skills that people are able to come up with in order to create mechanical creations,
Hmm.
and others that are going on in there as well. See how other people are reacting, and then you're not in this echo chamber of like,
Mm.
I know my sets of skills and I know what I can do, but I'm all by myself, so I don't know if I can grow. Well,
Yeah.
expose yourself to other people.
I love
Not,
that.
I'm
Immerse
not gonna
yourself
help
into
you.
that. No, I think that that's great. I think immersing yourself into that, because if we are talking about balancing multiple applications, and to your point, there's time limits that we're putting in place around education. There's no way for us to be able to cover everything that we want to in the classroom. So being able to expose students to all these different resources is so important so that they can see it's not just about how we do things here in this classroom. There's so many different options, right? So many different ways to explore that. I love that.
Absolutely.
So I love this, and we could keep this conversation going for a long time, but I know I'm very cognizant of the fact that you are very limited on time as well, as we've already talked about. So in wrapping up, I just wanted to see what advice you would give to educators about preparing this next generation of designers and makers. What are the things that you think education can focus on to better prepare these students for the future?
Yeah. Probably the biggest advice that I've got for any educator is to take your own course. So go through it, do the notes, do everything that you would want your students to be able to do, and see what issues that you run into. And this is why it's important for you to take copious notes. Did you give yourself enough time to be able to do these things? Did you feel like you had a good, reasonable foundation for starting? What sort of overall complications were solved? Is there a plan that gets me from no knowledge to all the knowledge that
Mm,
takes it in reasonable steps that logically sound good? Take your own course, see if it works. Um, I've the amount of times where I've had to take my course and slice it up so that I can add more pieces in or
hmm.
slow things down or remove things because they weren't necessary or they became obsolete. I do this at least twice a year per class just to figure out, are things working?
Hmm.
And then I've got special case students as well that fit into all sorts of different categories.
Hmm.
And does it work for them where they're coming from? Because oftentimes the sets of things that you would have to do to accommodate students who aren't in your classroom or have identified special needs, the
Hmm.
things that are going to benefit them are going to benefit everybody.
Hmm.
So take it from their point of view and see how they are experiencing your program and take copious notes and like have that third column on the right that says, what worked, what didn't work so well, and keep updating that. And then don't be afraid to throw everything away because it's just not working and readjust and start over.
Man, that's a bold thing to end on, I think, right? Being flexible in our approach and being able to say, we have to figure out what works, what doesn't. And plus, I've talked about this with quite a few other educators, is that when you're teaching technology, it's not something that you can develop the curriculum for and then just teach that same class for 5, 10 years. Things are changing constantly. And so being able to be flexible, like we're asking our students to be a lifelong learner, all of those skills really come through from the educator side as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that like my biggest frustration is I was teaching app development with Swift a couple of years ago, and in January, Apple updated their books completely and updated Swift completely, and then I had to like take it from that point and move it forward. And it's just like it's their
Just
decision,
when we had
it's
things
their
nailed
thing.
down, right?
So now we gotta like, and it was of course it was like the day before we went back to class. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, here we go.
Here we
Um,
go. We're going to be flexible just like the students are supposed to be. But man, does
that's
that put a
right.
lot of pressure on you guys? Yeah. So.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much, Charles, for joining us this afternoon. Before we close, I just wanted to call out a couple of different things. The first announcement is that as part of this Certified Academy Design program, we offer a boot camp. So we've talked about Autodesk, we've talked about Adobe, we've talked about Unity today, and these are all resources that we have available for our educators if you want to try the curriculum or the practice tests or the certification exams. So if you're looking to test those out, before you offer it to your students, send us an email at certifiedacademy@pearson.com and we can give you some more information about that. The second announcement is that even though this is the last webinar, this isn't our last chance to connect this summer, which is so great. We're having our Certified Educators Conference next month, June 17th through the 19th in Orlando, Florida. So we really hope that if you haven't already registered for that and are looking for a chance to connect with other creative educators, that you'll join us next month. So certified.certiport.com for more information about that as well. And thank you so much, Charles, and everyone who's been here to spend time with us. We really appreciate all of you, and we hope that this has been a great session for you to end the year on. We wish you a very happy testing season, end of the semester, and a great summer vacation. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here.